read about them. It's fine.
Give me the whole day. Give me the 40.
Good evening, and I'd like to call to order the July 10th, 2023 meeting of the East Penn School District Board of School Directors. We're going to do the pledge, but after the pledge, I would ask that you all remain standing to observe a moment of silence in honor of Haley Cook, a 12th grade student and field hockey player at Emmaus High School who sadly passed away on June 25th, 2023. Would you please rise? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Ms. Allen, are there any requests to address the board tonight? Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the June 2023 regular board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments or concerns? Seeing none, may I please, or Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next is the district update from Dr. Campbell.
It's hard to believe it's the second week in July already, and summer is flying by. A few quick announcements. Our senior citizen community education classes are open for registration. Links can be found on our district website. We've also been promoting those links via social media, and so we encourage our community members to take a look at the great community ed classes that we are proud to be able to offer. This is also a reminder, really a save the date. Our East Penn Education Foundation sponsors several events throughout the year that are very successful in raising funds that all come back to directly support the students and programs here of the East Penn School District. One of those events is the annual Education Foundation golf outing, which is planned for Monday, October 2nd. And so we encourage all golfers in the community to consider coming out to support the Education Foundation and, most importantly, the students of the East Penn School District. And another reminder I have is for all families that our buildings, including our district administration building, continues to remain open all summer. Our registrar is here, and we encourage families who are new to the district, including whether it's incoming kindergartners and or any families who have recently moved to the district and are interested in registering their students, please do that as soon as possible so that we can be prepared and welcome your student for the start of the school year. As the school year approaches, our buildings will communicate student orientation dates via their school websites as well as on social media. So we encourage families to please pay attention to that information that will be coming out likely starting in early August. And a final reminder I have is that just recently, all of our buildings sent out a returning student form last week. We ask that a parent or guardian submit the information each academic year. So even if you completed a returning student form last year, we still ask that all parents and guardians of current East Penn students complete the form again this year and submit that to us no later than September 1st. It's really important to us that we have accurate and updated information on all of our families so that in the event that we ever need to do any sort of communication with you, that we have the accurate information on file. So again, I recognize that July tends to be a month that's maybe a little more quiet, but we just remind families that we are starting to ramp things up for the start of next school year already. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, thank you again. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the biannual review version of the ARP ESSER Health and Safety Plan. As I mentioned, it's biannual review as required by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and there are no substantive changes to the plan that was approved back in January 2023. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Are there any, or would the administration like to say anything about it?
We don't. I think you did a great job just in identifying that this is really an obligation that school districts have to have the plan reviewed and approved every 6 months. And so because we continue to receive ESSER funds, we have an obligation to continue to have the plan approved and reviewed. And so there have been no substantive changes since our board last voted on the plan in January.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Campbell. Ms. Bowman?
I asked some questions privately that I just thought just want to make the information public. Because there were a few things on here that I was actually surprised we were still doing, not that I'm against them, but requiring students to wash hands before lunch, which is obviously good hygiene for many reasons, and cleaning every evening, and I forget what the other one is that I asked about.
I think the other one was about family screening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which beyond COVID, a lot of these are more just good hygiene practices. But are we, even if this plan wasn't in place, would we still be doing these things?
Yes, again, I'll say the three, and I appreciate you asking the questions publicly as well. The three items that you inquired about, really it's a standard and good hygiene practice for students to either wash hands or we have hand sanitizer available in classrooms as well as when they are ready to go through the lunch lines. Classrooms are cleaned and sanitized on a regular basis, on a nightly basis. And then the screening really is just a reminder to families, regardless of the season or time of year and what illness might be out there, just to be sure that when kids are coming to school that they're fever-free, symptom-free, so that they can be at their best and certainly not contaminating others. And so, yes, I will say those are probably standard and good health practices, even absent needing to have a plan approved. And I can appreciate that, one might say, well, why do we need to have the plan to formalize these procedures? Again, it really is an expectation through the state that we have a plan submitted.
So we have
Very timely.
ESSER funds through next year or 2 years?
Great question. You might recall that the board actually took action to have our ESSER funds in in reserve so that we could continue to allocate those funds outside of the spending period that was set forth to continue to support interventions and programs for our students. There are some ESSER dollars specifically designated for our homeless families that particular grant is still open. And so I will say certainly that's one piece of it. The other piece is the Department of Education continues to just advise that school districts have a plan approved biannually.
I guess the reason I asked that is if we do decide that some of these are things that we want to continue doing for all illnesses, whether it's COVID, flu, RSV, all the others, maybe at some point, especially when we're not required to do the health and safety plan, we might want to codify that in some other way, whether it's a policy or something else. So, but I'm not expecting anything today, but thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. Mr. Jankowski.
Just for my, it's been a while. With respect to reporting to the nurses, what is the policy? Are students still, if a student comes down with COVID, are they still required to report to the school nurse? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, we have the motion seconded. Ms. Allen, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falegi?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next on the agenda is our personnel items. I just have a couple of announcements. The first, we have the addition of, or I'm sorry, a change on a custodial staff appointment. Mr. Cody Schmeltzley, correct effective date is July 17th, 2023. And we made available an addendum prior to the meeting with hard copies at the back, and the electronic copy has been posted to board docs. May I have a motion to approve the personnel items, please?
Second.
Any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, Ms. Allen, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falake?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next is business operations. If there are no objections, I'd like to take items A, B, and C together. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Allen, please call the roll.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Falege?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowen?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
8 ayes.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next item is other educational entities, LCTI JOC member report. Mr. Champagne, do you have a report tonight?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Dr. Levinson. The Joint Operating Committee of LCTI met on Wednesday, June 26th. We talked at length about our Perkins grant and the review process that we just went under. And primarily it was focused on the fact that the indicators that LCTI has been presented with versus what the state has shown on a statewide basis shows that LCTI is below some of the target areas. And it's principally in the areas of literature, algebra. And I think one of the insights that we found from that is that, LCTI's score is a composite score of all sending districts. So it does not just represent East Penn, it represents all the sending districts, all the students that come from the sending districts. And as an example, the Keystone algebra tests, statewide is a 32% proficient. At LCTI, it's 27. And it really brings to mind the issues that we've been discussing about math and how we need to really focus the math strategies and the math curriculum, in particular for students who are going to look at some of the more advanced career paths that are offered at LCTI. And so there's an improvement plan in place that is required by the state for both of those areas. In particular in math, they're going to work with some daily math strategies in the classroom to help, with the students who may struggle. But I think it really comes back to the sending districts and the rigor that they are imposing upon the students that are going to LCTI in order to ensure that those students are well prepared to handle the career choices that they have offered to them, but also once they get in those career choices. There was also some discussion around what they call the post-program placement, which is what do the students do with their career past post-graduation. Unfortunately, the data, I don't know that LCTI is convinced it wasn't complete because it is a kind of a survey that's sent to graduates, and whether they actually find the survey, complete the survey, and then get it back to the state is the question. So, where the state is at 89%, showing students have some post-grad placement, LCTI is at 52%. And it was also, there were some questions about whether it happened during the COVID period. So they're digging into it. But I think the takeaway from that is that they're going to focus more heavily on getting each student at least one career development opportunity or work-based opportunity so that they can come out of that hopefully in a situation where they do find graduate placement. And then there's some discussion about non-traditional concentration of students who would you not think of are in things like welding or plumbing and so forth. And while LCTI has done better than the statewide average, it's still pretty low. And so there's again reinforcement that is necessary within the sending districts to really explore those career paths. And we think the fifth grade tours are a way to kind of help that, along with guest speakers and featured alumni. But I think circling back to it, the whole state is under an improvement plan because the whole state has not done well in some of those areas. And I don't know if Adam or Alan or Josh want to add anything to that, but that was a lengthy discussion because it really brings home, again, a lot of the more well-paying programs, the programs that like electrical, mechanical, welding, precision machining require a very strong math base. And, you know, those skills are going to continue to be needed. The administration also went on a strategic, a retreat for some strategic review. They did some industry site visits, so we heard a little bit about that. Camp LCTI was, they deemed a success. There were 135 attendees, 17 from East Penn. We also heard that the new electrical, mechanical, Metatronic space is complete. It was the old welding lab. It's a 6,000 square foot lab that they're going to be able to use. It'll have the ability to hold 60 students, both for the AM and PM situation. But unfortunately, both of those programs are not full. Again, it comes back to the math issue. In addition, we did hear that they are able to find the English language teacher that they had approved in the budget. So that was a great find, and an accountant that they've been searching for some time to support Holly Keller in the business office. We approved salary increases for the Educational Support Association, the Instructional Intervention and Intervention Assistants, the Teamsters. They're subject to a verification of the Allentown percentage increase, however. We also approved advancement on the salary scale for the teachers, approved salary increases for the Act 93 employees, the non-classified and confidential personnel employees, the business administrator, and the HR manager. And we approved all the benefit schedules. We also heard that the Emerging Teaching Professionals Program was approved, and that will focus on theory and practice for learning in the K through 12. It'll provide internship opportunities and dual enrollment potential credits up to 7 through L-Tri-C. We approved the communities and schools contracts, so the current social worker and the CIS coordinator will be both back on site, which is good news, in the amount of $107,000. And we also approved the LVHN Behavioral Science Services Agreement, and that's at no cost to LCTI. We updated the emergency operations plan, as many school districts have. And finally, we entered into a dual credit agreement with the Penn State Commonwealth campuses, which is something that we should have been had for a while. So that was just a kind of a formality. And that's my report. Adam or anybody else want to add anything on what we discussed?
Okay. Mr. Byrd, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I can maybe add a little bit. I think Paul did a great job of summarizing the conversation about the struggles that the school is having in terms of their data regarding math and a couple other areas. And I think it's important to highlight that, yes, not only is it a statewide challenge, but specifically to LCTI, I kind of think about the way that, some of the programs run in LCTI where you start out with a raw material and you eventually you work at something, you come up with a fine finished product. And I kind of see LCTI as that finishing touch of creating a final product of kids that are able to go out into whatever profession or field they want to go into and be productive members. But the LCTI's role in that is kind of to be like the 1,000 grit sandpaper and putting those finishing touches on. But a lot of the heavy work, that the heavy lift is done by the school districts that send their kids there, from the K-8 experience. And so we all have our own individual curricula and programs and our own resources and our varying degrees of differences in our demographics and the populations that we serve, and they all end up at LCTI and expecting to perform to the same standards, no matter where they came from, what program they came from, or what resources they use, because they're all following the same K-8 standards that are in place statewide. So it just kind of really hit home for me the importance of the interagency planning and the collaboration that takes place at the superintendent level and the OTL level among the different districts and the way that they share resources and communicate. Because for those students to arrive on the steps of LCTI and all have to come from those varying different places to create a finished product that's going to be representative of what LCTI is and what they do and their mission. It's a challenge. So that was a big conversation, and I had asked the administration to kind of share with us a little bit about how that process works. So I don't know if there's any insight that we can lend from an East Penn perspective into how that conversation goes, but that's just a added little wrinkle in telling the story behind a number in a table on a PDF. That there's a lot that goes into creating that number. So it was a good conversation, and not one that I remember having had before in all of my time on that board. So yeah, it was a good conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other comments from the board? Okay, again, thank you, Mr. Champagne, for your report. There are no other items to discuss tonight. A couple of announcements. First is we had an executive session this evening where the topic was personnel. Our next regular board meeting is on Monday, August 14th, here in the boardroom at 7:30 p.m. With no further business, I'd like to get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of July.